All right, everyone. It is Dr. Dan Ritchie, the president of the Functional Aging Institute here. It's Friday afternoon, March 3rd, and we've got Debbie Pillarella on with us, and she's going to be teaching us about training clients in large group settings. And I'm excited for this because we really haven't unveiled the curtain on our group exercise specialists, which Debbie and Dr. Diane were so instrumental in launching for the Functional Aging Institute, and we're so thankful of that. Debbie actually has been on our International Advisory Board since the very beginning, so she's the one that is keeping us in line and making sure we're putting out great stuff and has really helped hone our content. She's been teaching workshops for us around the country. I think she's been lobbying for that to be Fiji and Bali, but that hasn't happened yet. I've known Debbie since 2006, I think, when we first met at a medical fitness event at your facility in Munster. Yep. So Debbie, thanks so much for doing this. And
oh, you're welcome, Dan. It's my pleasure.
Take it away. I think you've got the slides, so have at it.
I do. Well, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day on this beautiful Friday to learn about training clients in large group settings. So a lot of us who've either been in the industry for a while or even if we're new to the industry, we want to try to really diversify our skill set and be able to reach as many people, particularly in this growing niche market, as possible. And so again, as Dan said, I've been in the industry for a bit of a time now, almost 3 decades. So I want to make sure that we hone in on some of the really important key factors with training older adults and how it differs when you're working in a large group setting compared to when you're doing it just one-on-one. So regarding our presentation today, the group exercise format for our baby boomer population, who we consider the coming of age, is the 50-plus market. And again, if you are an FAI follower or if you're certified through one of our credentials, you'll know that this market demographic really boasts some significant numbers. And in 2015, that was 74.9, almost 75 million, which is, again, if you look at that upward trajectory of where we're going in the next 5 to 10 years, those of you that are reaching this market share are really putting yourself in a really good position and in a much needed position. However, if you take a look at traditional exercise programs or models or even senior exercise models that maybe only use chair-based movements with very gentle, ginger types of movement patterns, you're going to find that you're missing the mark with this population. This group of people really want to be independent. Myself being 57 years of age, and I'm smack there, and I don't want to have to do what my mom is doing with her mother, pushing her in a wheelchair, and I know that, my folks don't want to have to be dependent on me as they're aging. So this market share that we're looking at is really important for us to understand and differentiate how we work differently with them than we would with, with other populations. So what we're going to be looking at in this webinar, we're going to look at a well-balanced, evidence-based group exercise program model. And again, I'm so grateful to be part of this, exploding industry, but being kind of on the heels of 2 criterion-based and credible leaders such as Dr. Cody and Dr. Ritchie, because they really help us underlie that evidence with what we're doing and why we're teaching what we're teaching. And again, Dr. Diane McCaughey, who is kind of my co-author with this, and she really took a lead in this entire curriculum. Everything that we do is based on our theories of the Functional Aging Institute. So again, you've got nice continuity of materials and curriculum that's all based in science, which you're not going to get in just a traditional group exercise model format. So what you're going to learn today is a variety of suggestions to be able to work with individuals in this group format that targets and improves function with an active aging adult. So we've got a couple of objectives for today. First of all, we're going to understand function briefly and learn how to offer regressions and progressions that are based on the functional need of this population while they're in a group setting. When you're working one-on-one with individuals, you have such a greater capacity to be able to really hit home on what their specific needs are, because you've got that hawk eye looking out for exactly what possible melodies they may have or dysfunctional movement patterns. But in a group setting, you've really got to broaden that skill set to be able to look at multiple things going on with multiple people at the same time. So the criticality of offering regressions and progressions simultaneously is something that we really need to become expert at. The next thing that we're going to do is identify movements and exercises for this population that have direct crossover in life. A lot of times if you look in therapy, settings, you're going to be talking and discussing transference to something called ADLs, or activities of daily living. We understand that this population typically needs to bend down and get up. They need to pick up their groceries, their grandchildren. They're, cleaning around their household, being able to reach up into cabinets, pushing a grocery cart, opening door. I mean, so if you look at the crossovers, and this population wants to do that and more with ease. The next objective that we're going to achieve with this presentation is to be understanding of the stages of learning and how to teach effectively based on these principles. I mean, my dad's 85 and mom's 80, and they come to my group classes, and dad's getting a little challenged with his hearing, so I have to think about what different teaching modalities I need to employ that might be different than when I'm teaching in a group setting for a younger population. So we're going to look at those different types of abilities to be able to teach, as well as what stage of learning our participants might be in. And then finally, we're going to understand the importance of what we call a multimodal or integrated program design that includes an underlying cognitive component. Again, when you take a look at the research and the evidence, this population is very concerned about being an independent individual as they're aging, and concerns with memory, Alzheimer's, dementia, et cetera, are significant. So we know that we can definitely do some things and integrate some things into our group classes that can assist in that cognitive stimulation and neural development. So we're going to take a look at that. So let's briefly identify some understanding for active aging adults and what functional components we need to think about. First of all, we know that functional capacity typically for the general population will decrease with advanced aging. I mean, that's kind of rooted in science, and we know that, but does it have to be the case? Is there an undeniable agreement across all disciplines that everyone is going to advance with age and they're going to have reduction in functional capacity? The jury's out on that. And again, if you follow the Functional Aging Institute and all of the theories and premises that we talk about, we know that we can thwart that, and we can really, we're going to take a look at a trajectory in a little bit that will really show that, being active and functional as you're advancing with age can really preserve the quality of your life with your functional capacity. The next thing that we know is that the degree and the rate of decline are variable. Obviously, we're all going to have a bit of decline, and that happens actually, in about our third decade of life. But again, the rate and the degree of severity with the decline is what we want to be able to target. And then individuals of the same age and gender can exhibit a highly variable level of function. I want you to take a look at the next picture and tell me what's the first thing that comes to your mind. Right? I asked this last weekend in California, and one of the things that everyone talked about was, wow, that's got to be an 80 or 90-year-old. That's the typical stereotypic view in your mind. But I want to tell you, the 80 or 90-year-old of this active aging population wants to be a lot more like Charles, who maybe you might have heard about, but Charles at the age of 97 is water skiing. And if you take a look at some of the growing boulder literature that's out there, I mean, you're going to see, obviously he's more of an elitist with, with what he wants to achieve in his older years, but it's definitely achievable if, again, the person has the desire and the need to want to get to that level. So what kind of functional categories do we need to consider? Well, as a fitness professional, we want to understand that there are different categories of older adults. Now, Charles, who you just saw his photo of, obviously out of these three, think about which category right now you would put him in. Well, if you're thinking elite, that's absolutely correct. Elite would be the highest level of function, right? And this is an individual who loves to compete. Did you see Charles with all of his gold medals around his neck? Well, he would be categorized as someone who works extremely hard to achieve the level of high physical function that he's able to be awarded. Now, physically fit is going to be that individual who has a higher than normal or higher than average function, and they're exercising for their health and well-being. So with these individuals, is it an aesthetic thing that they're really looking at? Is it a body comp goal or a weight goal? Probably not. They're more interested in their health and well-being. Individuals that want to be independent, typically they just want to be free of serious debilitating disease. They don't want to have to be wheelchair bound or dependent upon a walker or a cane. And they're physically active, but typically they don't have serious formal exercise in their lifestyle. And then you've got a couple of other functional categories, which is the frail and the dependent. And typically these individuals aren't going to be coming into our group settings or our arenas, but we want to be able to identify them. We want to be able to kind of understand that they are in existence. And I'm sure if you reflect back on that slide a few slides ago, that gentleman walking with the walker with the assistance of his aide would be that individual who would be clinically identified as one that would be frail. Obviously, dependent is that person who might be in a dependent living home or some sort of a senior older adult residency where someone was actually helping them with their activities of daily living. So now that we have that functional category of older adults, we know in our classes we're probably going to be working with the elite, the physically fit, and the independent older adults. What can we expect? Well, this slide really, again, this is extrapolated from the Functional Aging Institute's materials. So again, if you are certified, you've probably seen this in your modules. But what I want you to take a look at is the differentiation between the range of the function of individuals who are active, okay, which would be that red line, and those that typically are not and just kind of trudging along as life takes its toll as they age. So what you can see is that orange disability threshold that's horizontally across the chart that you're looking at really is reached pretty mid-later life. So if you take a look again at this screenshot here, you can see that around the age of 70, we see that typically individuals may potentially be crossing into that disability threshold. But if you can maintain function through the types of things that we're talking about with the Functional Aging Institute, we can actually preserve that, and we can have our older adults have a nice ability to have functional capacity, which is that red line, into their older age and fourth stage of life. Now there is something that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of, and again this is extrapolated from our modules in the Functional Aging Institute as our specialist model in our group exercise, but Naegie's disablement model, you know, before we looked at lifestyle and activity, Naegie in the 60s really said that disease and pathology was that underlying root cause for impairment and then functional limitations, which eventually led to disability. But now we know that lifestyle and inactivity causes just as much impairment and functional limitations as the disease state. So the Naegie model actually has been modified to be able to include that. This is where we all come in. This is where we can have such an incredible positive impact on these older adults because we can address the inactivity component. One of the things you also need to be aware of is, you know, in regards to physical fitness, I know when I was back in school, you know, you took a look at things like cardiovascular fitness and musculoskeletal fitness and flexibility, but rarely did you look at other types of physical functionality such as neuromuscular or cognitive emotional or mobility or balance. You know, over on the right-hand side in the blue and the purple, that was pretty much all we looked at in our, again, in my training that I had here in the United States. What we know now is that there is evidence that purports and argues that really when we're working with this population, we need to take a look at all of these aspects because impairments can happen in any of these arenas, and then we need to be able to address those impairments and be able to work with those regressions and progressions like we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. Let's take a look at a little bit of what types of exercise would be appropriate in a group setting for our active older adults, and you can see those listed for you on the screen. Obviously, we've got the aerobic and cardiovascular, but what you're going to see more in our group exercise module is working with body weight, external loads, balance, agility, functional dynamic movements, and coordination, because these, you know, entities are just as important, if not more important, than, you know, getting that aerobic component. So getting on a treadmill and having people, you know, do aerobic exercise isn't going to be that predominant part of what you're going to be seeing in this presentation or in our group exercise protocols that we're doing and we're using. One of the things that we want to really focus on is that we have our individuals that have different stages of learning. So the 3 stages that we are going to be explaining here are the cognitive stage, the associative stage, and the autonomous stage. Let me help you understand that. You've got a new person that comes into class, and you're going to talk about, doing, let's use something like a modified mountain climber. An individual can't maybe get onto the ground, but maybe you've got a 24-inch step platform set up, and you're going to want them to get into that plank position and do what a traditional mountain climber would be known as in the fitness arena. And I know we've got some individuals on the webinar from the UK, so mountain climber hopefully has the same meaning across the fitness world. But let me tell you, when you have an older adult that maybe hasn't participated in exercise in the past, and you tell the group we want to do some mountain climbers, that cognitive stage of learning is their awareness or unawareness of what that movement is expected of them, because they maybe haven't heard it before. So let's say that person then looks at you quizzically and you say, okay, let me show you, and you go ahead and you demonstrate what that mountain climber would be. As they practice that, okay, which is that second stage of learning, their neural patterns, their body is actually neuromuscularly rehearsing those patterns. The firing that's going on at the neural level is what's happening in that cognitive and that associative learning stage. After a few times, when you say mountain climber, that person does that move absolutely perfectly. Now their learning has become autonomous. So there's a total association between what you call out and what they do. So again, it takes us time, and an active older adult might need a little bit more time. Everyone goes through these stages of learning. It's just like a child learning to ride a bike. Initially, they're planning for the ride. They're maybe using some assistance with training wheels, etc. They're associating what they need to do in order to maintain their balance, and then they finally get it. So again, this is going to be one of those foundational pieces when we're working with our older adults. Things that, how that's going to be offered as a consideration when we're teaching, thinking about a regression and a progression. So again, if we're talking about doing some sort of a lunging pattern, you have to think about those individuals in your group that may have some limitations with their knees or their back, and what kind of a regression might you utilize for them. Maybe you'll have them go and hold one finger on a wall, on a bar, on a chair back that's against a wall if they have balance issues. And those individuals that can progress because maybe that lunge pattern that you're suggesting is too easy for them. So offering a version A, B, and C, or a level 1, 2, and 3 is really key here. And like I said, the stages of learning are listed there for you, but then in addition to that, what kind of learner are they? Remember earlier I talked about my 85-year-old father? He luckily has had cataract surgery, so his vision, he's very vision dependent because his auditory abilities are waning just a bit. When he gets his hearing aid, then he'll be all set and good to go, but right now, when I'm working with him in our classes, I'm utilizing his vision, and I'm utilizing kinesthetic, or the way that his body feels from the exercises that I'm asking them to do, okay? So how does this play into fitness professional? What it means is that when you're teaching your group class, you're talking, and that's an auditory opportunity, but you also have to get close enough so they can visually see what you're asking them to do, or utilize signs or station markers so that they can see, for those that are visually dependent, or utilize their vision more. And then kinesthetic is giving them the opportunity to do a rehearsal. If you're designing a circuit or you're asking them to do some sort of an exercise or movement, give them the opportunity to try it once and practice it before you start calling out the cadence that you're asking. Another consideration when we're teaching this population is something called BPV, benign positional vertigo. Many of our older adults are taking some blood pressure medications, or they may have things that when they change positions quickly can affect it's called orthostatic hypertension. So taking different blood pressure readings when they're either on the floor, sitting, standing, and the change in those positions can really alter those blood pressures, which could throw a very erratic vertigo or spinning or dizziness for a temporary situation. So again, what is this and how does this play into what we do? in our classes, when we're working with this population, it's not going to be a typical type of a HIIT class where they're on the ground doing mountain climbers and then jumping up in the air doing air jacks and then back to on the ground doing burpees. Those types of erratic positional changes could invoke something called this benign positional vertigo, and it's not anything that's life-threatening, but it definitely does not make an older active adult feel good. So we want to keep that in mind. And then the last thing, as far as a consideration, is the kinds of medications. Now, I'll tell you, being in a group environment can be a little bit of a challenge because different than personal training, you might not know everybody's medications. So you have to go with what do you know is most common with this population. And just like I said earlier, a lot of times you're going to see some of those medications for hypertension. And again, if you know, if you're not familiar with some of the side effects regarding exercise, you need to kind of do a little bit of a Google search to be able to see what do things such as beta blockers effect have on exercise and heart rate response, because we want to be able to modify the things that we're doing in a group setting to be able to make sure that our population has the most successful experience as possible. So what kind of fundamental foundations do we use? Typically in a group class, again, comparing the older active adults with just a general class, in stance positions, you're going to see that we utilize a lot of varied stance positions, not necessarily standing with our feet together or shoulder width apart for the majority of the class. You're going to see tandem, and if you take a look up at the upper right picture of the foot photograph that you see, that is a semi-tandem stance that we're looking at. Tandem would be the heel of that front foot is touching the toe of the back foot, and where there's a very tight wire, almost like a line, a person standing on a line doing a sobriety test. So we're going to utilize wide stances, narrow stances, staggered stances, and even single leg, where one leg is elevated versus the other leg. All of these different stance positions challenges this population. And we want to include that. So again, think out of the box. If you're teaching a group class and next time everybody's standing in a normal, traditional stance, switch it up a little bit. Give them something different to do with their feet. And you'll see, again, great results just from a functional perspective, because our world isn't just symmetrical. You know, we don't just always be able to stand with our feet, at attention. Another thing you want to think about is the arm movements. Do the arm movements always have to be bilateral? Does every arm movement have to work in tandem with the other? No, not at all. And in our programs, you're going to see that we talk about reciprocating arm movements. We talk about alternating arm movements. How about, did you ever think about putting different weights in different hands? So maybe you have a 5-pound weight in one hand and an 8-pound weight in the other. Think about what that's going to do to activate the core and fire the musculature, to upright the body, and be able to stimulate, again, a lot of neural activity, which is a functional opportunity, and then switching those weights. Remember, life isn't symmetrical. I mean, you might carry, a 5-pound sack of potatoes on the right, and you're holding your 30-pound grandchild on the left. So we have to be able to work just like I told you earlier, with crossover in mind. What types of things do these people, utilize and need in their daily activities at home? A couple of other things you want to think about is speed, tempo, and rhythm variations. Once again, having people exercise to the clapping of your hands, or a speed or a tempo that is different than just your traditional 2 counts up, 1 count down, or 2 counts up, 4 counts down. Again, changing neural stimulation, the mind, the body, all working together with variations. And then lastly, mobility and gait. In our group classes, we're going to do a lot of walking and different types of walking, on your tiptoes, on your heels, walking a straight line, crossover walking, using some PNF patterns or cross body patterns to be able to, again, utilize right and left sides of the brain, and we integrate that into our group classes. Like I said earlier, one of the things we consider always is cognition. If you take a look at the screen here, and this again is compliments of Dr. Chuck Hillman at the University of Illinois, after 20 minutes of sitting quietly, what you're looking at is what's called a functional MRI picture, and it's basically a scan of the brain for neural activity. And you can see that after sitting quietly, look how much of the brain quiets, right? And quieting meaning the less colors are being visible here. After 20 minutes of walking on the right picture, you can see all of the different color centers that have been lit up. It's like walking into a dark room and flipping the light switch on. Cognition and having the brain health be part of what we're doing is absolutely critical and should be part of everything that we're talking about. So how do we do this? What does it look like in a group setting? Well, in California last weekend, we had playing cards all over the floor, and people walked down to a particular cone. They bent over, they picked up a card, and what they were doing on the way back, as I was calling out, what's your suit? They would say hearts. What's your number? 7. What's your color? Red. And I keep asking those things, suit, color, number, and it would just, again, have them, you have to look at a card, process it, and then speak to it. So of course it sounded very chaotic because everybody had a different card and was speaking out of turn, but again, it was stimulating, it was cognitively stimulating while they were doing exercise. So you can get a lot done and a lot of bang for the buck when you add some cognition into your group exercise workouts. So let's talk about some of the building blocks. Well, one thing that we really like to do is do some eye-hand coordination. We do bilateral and unilateral work. We love to work with stability balls. You know, they're nice, they're big, they're soft, they're squishy. So again, people can get their fingers in there. Think about arthritis and types of conditions that the older adult population has to deal with. Working with a stability ball, and again, it's nice and big, plays a really nice part in working with them in a group setting. Doing some stationary things for eye-hand coordination, and then doing some dynamic things like lunging from side to side while bouncing the ball with the right hand and the left hand behind your back, and then switching to the other, or switching the ball bounces from the right to the left, closing the right eye and doing it only with the opposite hand and then the left eye, and then trying to close both eyes. I mean, again, we're utilizing all of those principles that we talked about, vision, kinesthetic awareness, and auditory cues. Putting people together and having them work with partners, that is another piece of being able to have the coordination of their eye and their hand and their movement, and now they have another person that they have to work with. One of the things, again, to add cognition, let me give you an idea. If bouncing with the right hand is going to be move number 1, and bouncing with the left hand is move number 2, and bouncing with both hands is move number 3, I might call out, okay, 3. And they should be bouncing with 2 hands, and then 1, and they should be bouncing with maybe the right, and then 2, and then call those numbers out randomly, and it almost becomes an enjoyable, funny game because people can't, oh my goodness, was it 2 or 1, was it my right hand or my left hand? So again, just adding another layer, you know, layering that variety and being able to work with all of the different building blocks works very nicely, again, in group setting. Other kinds of things that we use from a building blocks perspective is doing stepping or walking patterns. Now, imaginary is, think of what kinds of things cross over into life. They may have dogs, cats, toys, things that might be on the floor, walking patterns that they might engage in their real world. A curb, so putting things and imagining walking and then lifting your leg to step over the dog, and you'll see some of the movement patterns in our certification program talks about, you know, dog and bush and movement patterns that would simulate these imaginary obstacles that come in their way. And then once we have that imaginary obstacle, let's put some real obstacles down, and let's create an obstacle course or a park course that has objects that individuals in our classes have to step over, stepping forward, stepping sideways, you know, thinking of that multimodal, cross-disciplinary, three-dimensional world that everyone lives in. And then adding the cognition. You know, I love to use paper plates. Even though gliders are available, they're very expensive. You can go to the dollar store and get a bunch of different colored paper plates. And once again, you can coordinate a move with a color. So let's take those first 3 plates, orange, white, and blue. If, you know, if I show an orange plate, I'm going to want you to do stationary squats. And a white plate is going to be another move that I might talk about, maybe you know, an upper body row with a resistance tube, and then a blue plate would be another move. And then you can use those colors to, again, add cognition, have them think about, okay, a push-up was this, a squat was this, and then use those colors. Another thing you can do is have the plates distributed, and in each person in front of them, they can, again, touch or squat or lunge or do some sort of a movement pattern utilizing the colors of the plates. Again, adding that layer of cognition. Cards just talks about utilizing a very simple 99-cent deck of cards and thinking about the different things that you could incorporate to be able to add that cognitive layer in there. And then memorizations. Again, we did an activity last weekend where I had them bouncing the ball and they were doing things, and I said, I'm going to say a word and I want you to spell it backwards. Spell the word cat. Well, that was pretty easy, TAC. But now I want you to spell the word horse backwards. Well, that gets a little more difficult because it's more letters than just 3. Once again, we're playing with cognition, but they're still working on those group skills that I want them to work on. So let's take a look at some specific exercises. We typically do not employ doing a lot of core work on the floor. We take a look at Dr. Stuart McGill's work and we look at the functionality of the core and how particularly this population utilizes their core. They're using their core off the floor. Their core is being utilized to stabilize their body or to create mobility movements as they're going through their daily activities. So, you know, if we have to work with some isolations, we do that, but we also work always toward integration. We do more difficult things first before we work toward simpler types of movements, because we want people, while they have high levels of energy, to be able to be successful in our classes. Perturbations, if you're not familiar with those are, I want you to kind of jot that down and I want you to Google it or go to YouTube. But perturbations is actually being able to touch a person and have their writing reaction trigger and fire so that it helps reduce the risk of falling. So if you were standing still, maybe doing a row pattern with a resistance tube against a cable or with a partner, and I just touched your right shoulder to try to push you slightly to the left, and you resisted me to be able to stand straight and tall, you were actually co-contracting the muscles on the opposite side of the body to avoid falling over or losing your balance. So perturbations are really nice to use, especially with core activation. And then adding that external resistance, just as you see in this picture, which is our typical wood chopping pattern, is another nice thing to be able to do. I talked earlier about utilizing patterns in gait, such as working in unison, where everybody does a certain kind of walk, walking and lifting a knee, doing a staggered walk pattern, walking to the rhythm of my hand clapping, doing a walk as everyone is in this picture in unison, doing a walk in a circle, or even doing line work where everybody's walking in lines together. Works really nicely. The fun part for most of the adults, the older adults that I work with, is to work with circuits and stations because they really enjoy stuff such as what you're seeing here, you know, working with comrades, you know, camaraderie of their other people in their group, and just having a really, really good time while getting a lot of good exercise completed as well. The chair stands, and again, if you are a functional aging certified specialist, you know that some of these things are actually assessments that we do. Why do we do these in our circuits and our stations? Because this is functional. It has exact transference over into what we do in our daily lives. So doing chair stands is actually going to get you better getting in and out of a chair, and the next time we do our chair stand 30-second assessment, you're actually going to score better and show improvements in there. Get ups is something different. Not sure if you guys have your participants practice getting up off the floor. Sometimes individuals of this age range have a greater risk of falling, and if they end up on the floor, they're very, very fearful of how they're going to get up. So we practice getting up. I don't want them to be fearful of falling. So we say, let's imagine that you did fall and you've landed on the ground. Let's practice getting up, and let's strengthen the coordination of those muscles that's needed to be able to get yourself up out of off of the floor. Dot drills, again, that's just an example of utilizing those colored paper plates or dots, and even indicating orange means a push-up and red means a squat, and having that even written right on the plate, taped on a wall. And what are we doing? We're having them utilize their vision and their cognitive skills of reading the directions and then performing the activity at that station. River walk is something that is very enjoyable because it simulates a person walking through the river and maybe coming across a pebble, a rock, a stone, a log, and having to step over objects in this river, practicing their gait patterns, utilizing single leg lifts, which is lifting over objects, which is part of our balance skill set. Get Up and Go is actually extrapolated directly from our assessment battery that we use in our functional aging credentials program, and that's where you're sitting in a chair that's kind of propped nicely against a wall. You get up and you walk 8 foot going around a cone and get back as fast as you can. So instead of doing it as an assessment, we put it in as a circuit, and we put it in, and what can you do here to make it a little bit more fun? Give the person a ball, have them bounce it, have them toss it in the air. So again, just adding a little bit more layer of diversity and variety to that. And then the last suggestion would be to have a station where you're actually working on balance, single leg, double leg. We don't typically promote the BOSU type of work, especially on the dome side, just because of the malalignment of the ankle, if you ever take a look at that. So there's lots of other opportunities, such as using AirX pads to be able to work with balance challenges. So yeah, we suggest that the BOSU is not your go-to. Kind of coming to near the close here, what would a class look like? Well, some of the teaching guidelines we want to leave you with is that you always want to make sure that you have a little bit more of an extended warm-up, whether they do the warm-up, in a traditional group setting, or you've got them all on a track or a treadmill. And then the next section is the skills section. The beginning of that skills section is where you're going to work on that multi-sensory, visual, vestibular, somatosensory, things that are more difficult while they're fresh in the workout. And then thinking about, again, the center of gravity, altering the center of gravity from a high position to a half kneeling position to be able to, again, simulate training them in more of that functional way. Working on the gait enhancements using some of the line series work that we talked about. Fall prevention is another key element that we work on. And again, this is going to be a little different than a typical circuit station class, but there's lots of ways you can add fall prevention station. Strength training doesn't necessarily correlate to being more functional. So even though it's important to be strong, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you that functional transference. So it is included, but it isn't the whole, the whole focus of the class. Posture work is another element that we work on, is having people stand against a wall and pressing their scapula against the wall to, again, retract those, their scapular region, and drawing the head and neck back into what's more of an aligned position, a neutrally aligned spine, because a lot of our older adults are getting more of a kyphotic forward head type of a posture. So we work on that. And then finally, having a little bit of fun, doing some more aggressive, quicker paced movement patterns to get some of that cardiovascular efficiency in that skills section works really nicely. And then at the end, we want to include some flexibility, but this isn't necessarily just static, isolated flexibility. It's more what we need in our lives. So it's dynamic flexibility, including ranges of motion. And then at the base of the whole class, remembering that we're doing cognitive types of things and intertwining that all through our entire class format. If you do this right and you get a nice, name of your class and your program, you can really be known in your communities as the expert. Again, just from my own experience, this is a picture of some of our older adults in a class that we call FLEE, Functional Living Exercise for Everyone. This class has grown from a group of about 15 to now we've got over 50 people. We offer it every day of the week except Sundays. And it's just really put us on the map in Northwest Indiana, and all of our classes in our FLEE program utilize the Functional Aging Specialist foundations, and all of our trainers who work with this population have those credentials, so we're all speaking the same language from the same pulpit. So again, you can become a group exercise specialist. The Functional Aging Institute does offer the program, so I know Dan's going to talk a little bit about that as we close here. If you're wondering, like, how does this all look, and when you put it together, if you're anyone out there that's like me, I like to have things organized. So we do have, again, in our materials, but I've offered it here for you. This is a sample of what I use with all of our FLEE instructors. How do you build your functional active aging workout session? We try to look at the section of the workout, including all of the elements that we discussed earlier, what kind of movements and exercises we're doing, and how we're targeting those areas, so that then we can be assured that every time, every participant in every class is going to leave with a well-rounded functional experience that's not only beneficial and functional, but fun. And So that is kind of wrapping up our entire presentation. So again, what you see on the screen is our URL for our website for our certification, and Dan's going to talk a little bit more about some special offers that we have between now and the end of March for our group exercise specialist certification program that is available online with modules. And the nice thing about this is that there are lots of embedded videos of our classes and what we're doing. So it's not just text reading materials, but you're actually going to be able to see us working with this active population in a variety of different ways with group exercise. We are also credentialed to be offering continuing ed credits, so if you do carry additional certifications, you can see all of the wonderful organizations that support our programming, and those are a list of references if you have any desire to kind of look and see what and where we got our information. If you have some questions and you want to chat with us, go ahead and populate that chat box, which is on your right-hand side of the screen. And I'm going to have Dan talk a little bit about some of the specials that we're offering now in the month of March for those of you that are interested in working more with the group arena for functional aging.
Yeah, Debbie, thanks so much. That was awesome stuff. Great content. I'm sure the folks that attended live in California were really blessed by that, and we've got a couple questions already coming in, so if folks have questions, now is the time to ask. We'll keep Debbie on for about 10-15 minutes here. So Juan actually asks, how do you work even more with special populations, right? So like how do you work with stroke patients, surgery rehab, some of those sorts of things?
So my facility that I work at is a hospital-based facility, so I have a little bit of an advantage because we do have outpatient units that are within our facility. But separate from that, again, you would follow the same types of protocols as far as getting the necessary clearances with any recommendations for consideration. So again, from a stroke patient's perspective, being able to utilize any support types of things. We do have some people that have Parkinson's in our program. I mean, the picture that you looked at, I mean, the oldest guide was my dad at 85, and, you know, he has hypertension and hypercholesterolemia. My mother has had a knee replacement, and if I could tell you each of those individuals that have all come with some condition that they're dealing with. So again, as a professional in that arena, understanding and knowing the kinds of things, but making regressions and progressions for those individuals so that you will become more well-versed with what do you do with your stroke population or what you do with those that may have, you know, neuromuscular challenges or replacement. You know, if there's a replacement, a knee replacement, a hip replacement, you got to be cognizant of what types of movement patterns would be most appropriate for them. So there is a bit of an education curve, especially when you work with this population, but to be safe, if they do come with recommendations as far as getting clearances, I know all of you are probably very well, you know, utilizing a lot of your medical and history clearances to make sure that you're doing the best and safest, most effective things that you can. So yeah, we'll work with special populations and then just make those modifications.
Okay, several have asked about the recording. The recording, if you registered for this, the recording will be sent to you automatically, usually in about 30 to 45 minutes. It takes a few minutes for the recording to process, and then the system automatically sends you out an email with a link for the recording. You won't get the PowerPoint. A couple people, Debbie, asked for the PowerPoint. We normally don't give out our PowerPoint since that is our content, and we don't like people taking our PowerPoints and then presenting at other programs and things like that. But you will get the video, so you can obviously watch all the slides again. So that's going out to everyone that's registered. We also tend to put webinar recordings up on our Facebook wall. So if you're not regularly checking the Functional Aging Institute Facebook wall, there are a wealth of past webinars that are up there as you scroll through. We are about to get to the point where we're not going to release recordings anymore. You're going to have to be on live. We're going to start putting some of these webinars into an FAI membership vault, so keep that in mind as you move forward. Debbie, here's a great question from Marcia. For an average community class, what length class time do you find works best?
We find that the 45-minute time frame works best. keep in mind that this population loves to socialize.
Mhm.
So if you, is that an understatement, Dan?
Yeah, yeah. So you're gonna have to tell us in the 45 minutes how much is actually exercise time.
Yeah, you're probably going to have a good 30 minutes of formal exercise, but again, the socialization and just the camaraderie of being there and being together in and of itself is an accomplishment. So we always slot on our schedule. It's a 45-minute, and again, you want to think about some of these people. We do have people that come in with, devices that are a little slower. I actually have one woman in one of my classes that has some oxygen that she uses. So you might on your schedule if it's a community-based class, if you're maybe in a JCC or a community center, the class, 30 minutes seems a little too short if you just bill it for 30 minutes. But if you bill it for 45 and you know you're going to get 30 good minutes out of it, that's going to give you some play time on either side to be able to get it in that 45 minute. Most of these people, by the time the hour they're done. They need, they're
Yeah,
like
too long.
They're
Too
done.
long.
Yeah,
Yeah,
too long, and they don't need to.
I totally agree. We tend to lean towards.
What do you guys do at Miracles?
We tend to lean towards 30-minute sessions, and that works really well. But there is a challenge with getting all the group camaraderie time. And it's funny. I've dealt with a number of Canadians who just say, "How can you get all the high fives, all the hugs, and all the group stuff done in 30 minutes?" So they have to do 40 minutes because they're Canadian and they're all all about the politeness and that sort of stuff. So I always laugh about that. Couple more good questions before we let you go. Randy asks if you could give a quick example of a group progression and regression.
Yeah, certainly. So let's say that we're doing the wood chop, right? Let's say that's going to be our movement. That's going to be our base movement. So if regards to a regression, I've got someone who has a balance issue, right? And they're having difficulty even just standing, but I know that they need to be able to do some movement in that transverse plane. So I might have them sit in a chair, and they can do the wood chop while they're sitting in a chair. That would be a regression. Or I might have them kneeling on the ground or something where they're a little bit safer to avoid that risk of a balance challenge. From a progression perspective, the person that needs more than that, I might give them a tube, a medicine ball, or something that would present an external load for an additional challenge. And I may even have them do a wood chop where they're doing an abduction with the one leg as they're lifting up and reaching over and across, or even do some extension into their back. So, taking a pretty streamlined exercise and then thinking about one thing you can do to make it easier for a population that's challenged, and then one thing you can do to make it harder, and that gives every person in that class, and you're showing all of the versions, and you say, here's the exercise. If you don't like this and you want it easier, here's what you can do. And if you don't like this and you want it harder, here's what you can do. I really try to avoid labeling people, because you're never going to hear me say, if you're a beginner, do this, and if you're advanced, do that. We don't like to put the sticky labels on there. We just say, here's our exercise we're doing. If you don't like this and you want it to, to be somewhat easier, here, you can pick this one, or somewhat harder is that one. And then it really puts it back on the person to make that decision. Because you know what, to be honest, everybody's days are different. Today, you might have felt like, I'm a 10, I can be a rock star and do a progression, and tomorrow I could have had a bad night, I might have arthritis that flared up, and I'm going to have to use your regression. So that's a lot of what you find with this population. Don't you find that, Dan, with you guys as well?
Yeah, absolutely true. And even from exercise to exercise, right? You might be lower body, you might be high level, you need the progression, and then you get to some upper body and you got shoulder issues and you need the regression. And so you can't say somebody's a beginner or an advanced, because they may be all kinds of levels depending on the movement, so.
Right.
All right, last question from Nancy, who I'm guessing must have picked up the group exercise course already, because she's asking a very specific question. She wants to know, what is the brand and the name of the soft flexible cones used in the river obstacle course shown in the Group X program? Do you remember, Debbie, what the brand of the soft flexible cones is?
Oh my, I don't, but I can. So Nancy, if you want to, maybe Dan, you can let me know afterwards if you got her email or phone number. I will get I'll get that for you. But you know what? I'll tell you, we use Power Systems. And Nancy, I'm not sure where you are, if you're domestic or international, but Power Systems is where we get like a lot of our cones. Even from in the River Rock one, there were also these like dome-shaped little things that look like they had some spikes on them. Just some tactile types of things, some neural stimulation for feet if we do some things without shoes on. But I can get you the actual, URL of where you can pick that stuff up.
Okay.
Not a problem.
So Nancy, email Celia at the usual contact email, and Celia can get that specific from you. But yeah, I think my recollection, Debbie, when I was watching you guys film that, they all looked like standard stuff you could order from Power Systems.
Yeah, it is. And actually it's in like that sports section where you've got all the little hurdle things and, agility ladders and that kind of stuff.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So basically the group exercise specialist has been out now for about 6 months, and we haven't really touted it a whole lot because we've been rebuilding the website, and so we have kept it at $199, which was the intro price. And so if you're interested in becoming a functional aging group exercise specialist, highly encourage you to check that out, because at the end of March we are going to be raising the price to $299, and eventually we'll have the price at $399, the same as the functional aging specialist. It is similar in foundation to the functional aging specialist. Big difference is that Debbie and Diane walk you through a bunch of large group activities, with a bunch of live large group clients, as opposed to the functional aging specialist, which is all me and Cody taking you through one-on-one training, exercise, movements. So now you get to see large groups of clients doing the River Rock obstacle course and doing different balance things and all sorts of things that Debbie talked about today. So if you're already a functional aging specialist, it's only $99 for you to grab the Group X. There's really no reason not to add it for even just the continuing education. You get, again, the 10 hours of CECs from all the organizations. So if you do work with large groups, we strongly encourage you to check out the Group X. You can find it on functionalaginginstitute.com. Simply click on the certifications tab, or you can find it on our new website, which is faiEducation.com. So faiEducation.com, and you can find all our courses there, including some of our new courses as well. So Debbie, thanks so much for coming on and sharing great content with us today, and for all you've done for FAI.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks
everyone
everyone
for listening.